Hi everyone, my name's Jeff Dean and I'm Math Dad. I'm here to help you help your kids understand math. Today I'm coming to you with tip number 5, and here it is. Memorizing is not understanding. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Imagine two people who both want to bake a cake. The first person has a recipe memorized and they can do it step by step from beginning to end, but they have no understanding of baking. The other person has a complete understanding of baking and they've memorized the exact same recipe. What will happen at the end of this whole process? Well, both people will probably have the cake. Both people will probably have a great cake based on that recipe. And you might not really notice a difference between them. But the difference is, even though they both ended up with the exact same cake, if something had to be tweaked or something had to change, person number one would have to go back and follow a brand new recipe. But person number two, since they have this understanding of baking, may be able to just tweak a few things, change a few things up so that they generate a different recipe or a different process and get a completely different cake. You see, person number one who doesn't understand baking would have to memorize recipe after recipe after recipe for everything they want to do. But person number two may be able to take one recipe and continuously tweak it and change it and mold it and make it into something completely different because they have an understanding of baking. So what does this have to do with math? Well, a lot of times people memorize steps or memorize processes or memorize facts in math. And those facts can lead to correct answers, which is wonderful. That's what we want. We do want to have correct answers. But imagine the same scenario, but with math people. Two people working on the exact same problem. One person has a process or steps absolutely memorized from beginning to end. Person number two has an understanding of the math and because of that has memorized a process. They're both probably going to get that one problem correct. But if your math homework was like my math homework, we know that there's always the dreaded problem number 2. And in that problem, it's like, well, the teacher didn't show me how to do that problem. Well, the student who has the process memorized may struggle a little bit because something needs to be tweaked. The person who has understanding can take the process that they've learned and mold it and make it what they need it to be so that they can get another correct answer. And in a sense, have created a new process. So the first student, if there were 10 problems on this sheet and they were all a little bit different, might need 10 different processes that they had to memorize. That can be hard to learn. Versus if they focus on understanding the whole picture, what's happening, how things work together, what are the relationships involved here, those 10 problems become one concept. And that understanding allows them to tweak and mold and shift and go the direction they need to go so that they can do those things correctly. Think about it like this. Imagine that you needed to go from the grocery store and get back home. I bet every single parent out there has their best way to go. If you're at the grocery store and you need to get home, you have the path to get you home. Now, what if that's the only path that you know? You know, I go straight down this street, turn left, turn right, and I'm at my house. That's great, unless, what if the road's closed? What if there's construction? What if there's a car accident and you can't go down the way that you're used to going? Well, either you are stuck or you have to rely on the fact that you probably have a bigger understanding of how streets and roads work so that you can make an adjustment. You turn down a different road, you head a different direction to begin with, but eventually you end up at the same place. The person who has an understanding of how the road system works doesn't have to worry about if a road's closed or if something gets blocked or they have to reroute or even take someone home. They can continuously change the way that they're moving down the roads because they have an understanding. But if they only have one route memorized and that way gets blocked, they have access to nothing. And that's the point. That's how math works. See, if all you have is a process memorized, what happens if there's one piece that you get caught up on or one part that you can't remember? If all you're doing is relying on what you've memorized, you're stuck. You can't go anywhere else because that process can't move on. You can't remember. That's the problem with just memorizing. But if you have an understanding of what's going on and you get to a point and you're like, I can't remember what to do, you might say, well, but I understand enough. Maybe I try this. Maybe I go over there. Maybe I work on this technique. And eventually we work our way around the problem and we can get to where we're going. So, I want you to really think about this because I'm not saying that memorizing things in math is bad. What I'm saying is maybe we rethink when we do the memorizing. Because when you have an understanding of the road system, that eventually leads to certain routes being memorized. When you have an understanding of baking, that's going to lead to certain recipes being memorized. When you have an understanding of mathematics or you have an understanding of a concept, that's going to lead to processes being memorized. But if you start with memorizing, that doesn't necessarily lead to understanding. And you find yourself getting stuck. So, parents, if you see your kids getting frustrated because they don't know what to do or a problem that they're working on doesn't look like exactly what the teacher did in class that day, I bet they've memorized a process, but they don't quite have an understanding of the concept they're learning. We need to try to help them understand the concept. And that's what we're going to start working on in these videos, is start looking at some concepts so we can help our kids with the concepts, which will lead to understanding and lead to some memorization. So that's it. Tip number 5, memorizing is not understanding. But remember, understanding can lead and does lead to memorization. I'm Jeff Dean. I'm Math Dad.